Hello everybody, Michael the Librarian of Magic here, finding and cataloging the magical and pointing you to it, back once again this October the 11th with another drawing of a Disney villain for you today. The same disclaimers as usual apply. You can find those and the rest of my content in the links that follow this video. So without further ado, as usual, I'm going to jump into the Disney villain of the day. Today's sketch or drawing is the marvelous Madam Mim from The Sword and the Stone, 1963. The Sword and the Stone is my absolute #1 favorite Disney animated classic. It is wonderful. Every time I watch it, it is great. The characters and Madam Mim here is no exception. Were designed and drawn by Bill Peet. So let me take the opportunity of drawing Mim here as an opportunity to talk about Bill Peet. Bill Peet was an animator who came to work with Disney during the tail end of the production of Snow White, and then continued to work at Walt Disney Animation Studios all the way until the early development of The Jungle Book in 1967, at which time he got into an irreconcilable argument with Walt and left the company. He and Walt were both just very strong-headed, strong-willed, creative types, and they just didn't see eye to eye a lot of the times, and so Bill Peet eventually left the company. But he was a brilliant story artist, storyboard artist, and story developer and writer. He worked his way through developing with various projects through Fantasia and Dumbo and so on, and by the time they got around to making The Sword and the Stone in 1963 and 101 Dalmatians, Bill Peet was the sole developer for both of those movies. He drew the storyboard character sketches, which were then animated by other animators, but he drew the initial conceptions, he wrote all the screenplays, and he directed all of the voice actors. So that movie, especially The Sword and the Stone and 101 Dalmatians, you really see Bill Peet's style and creative output on display. And because of The Sword and the Stone and some other childhood attachments I have to his children's books, Bill Peet is one of my favorite Disney legends. I really, really like his work a lot. My library growing up in my hometown had some Bill Peet children's books. He wrote and illustrated an autobiography of his, which they had. I used to check that out all the time. And also The Ant and the Elephant and The Wing Ding Dilly, among others. And if you get a hold of any of his children's books, which he had a very successful children's book career after he worked for Disney, if you get a hold of any of those books, you'll really see his influence on The Sword and the Stone and lots of other Disney movies, even The Jungle Book. Even though he left that production early, you really see his artistic influence on those films. The art style is very much in his drawing style, and when you read his books, you start to understand his storytelling sensibilities as well, and that really comes through in the movies. So Bill Peet came up with Madam Mim, the character design for Madam Mim. She was actually in a book. The Sword and the Stone is based on a book called The Once and Future King by T.H. White, which is his interpretation of Arthurian legend. And Mim features in the earlier version of that book. So he didn't. Bill Peet didn't invent the character. T.H. White did. However, the Disney conception, that's all Bill Peet and the other animators and voice actors that worked on it. The Once and Future King, by the way, is also a wonderful, wonderful book that is well worth a read if you love the stories of King Arthur, and if you love The Sword and the Stone. The story of the movie and The Sword and the Stone is really only the first third or half of The Once and Future King. If you've ever gotten to the end of The Sword and the Stone, when Wart becomes King Arthur, spoiler alert for a super old movie, if you've ever gotten to the end of that movie and you wonder what happens next now that Arthur is king, read The Once and Future King. It tells you what happens next. It tells you what happens to all of those characters. It's an excellent, excellent book. Mim was voiced in The Sword and the Stone by Martha Wentworth, who was an actress who was in a ton of movies. If you look at her filmography, she was in lots of stuff. And she was one of those people sort of like June Foray, who was a woman of 100 voices. She also did a lot of voice acting in her career. Disney-wise, she was the voice of Mim and also the grandmother Squirrel in The Sword and the Stone, and she also voiced Nanny, Queenie, and Lucy in 101 Dalmatians. Mim and the squirrel, but Mim in particular was her final screen role ever. And what a great character Mim is. She's so colorful. She's so funny. I love her design where she's kind of like short and squat, but then she's such a powerful magician that she can rival Merlin and she can transform herself into all these things. She has an excellent song, which, as you know, I really love when a villain has got a really fun song, and Mim is no exception. It is very, very funny to me every time I watch it. I love The Sword and the Stone from beginning to end. I love all the characters in it. Like I said, it's my favorite, and Mim is no exception. I love the Mim sequence. That movie is just so amusing and fun to me and funny, and Madame Mim, as a result, is just one of my favorite Disney villains. I think she's so over the top and just excellent. I love watching that movie any chance that I can. So hopefully you enjoy this sketch here. By the way, I just remembered to say, I just looked up original storyboard sketches for The Sword and the Stone, and then found one and just copied it down. I just used it as a reference and then drew it. This is one of the few ones that I've done so far that I haven't used any sort of tutorial as a framework or a basis for. I just looked at an image and drew it and was really happy with that turnout. I don't do that very often because I'm not always super confident in my abilities, but I thought this one, Mim, I thought was simple enough in terms of body type and shapes that I could give it a try, and so I did, and I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. There are aspects that I can be critical of because you're always your own worst critic, but I think you can certainly tell it's her, and it's really fun, and it also looks just a little bit like Bill Pete's style, which makes me really happy that I was able to draw even remotely a little bit like him. So I consider that a victory. Do you like Madame Mim? Is she one of your favorites? Maybe she's somewhat new to you. Maybe this inspired you to go check out The Sword and the Stone again, or read T.H. White's Once and Future King. Like I said, if you want to know what happens, that book tells you what happens. It tells you what happens to Arthur and Merlin and the whole gang. And there's even more characters that you don't know about yet. So read the Once and Future King. It's really worth your time. Thanks for watching these videos. Thanks for following along with the October series, and come back tomorrow and watch another one when I draw another Disney villain for the month of October. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.